All right, I'm gonna start if you want.
All right. So here's Hannah and Will's group curriculum. Hi. We are going to be discussing 6th through 11th grade.
Yep, so first up, we are going to be starting off with 6th grade, which is world geography. So our course description for it is 6th grade students will focus on world geography. Specifically, students will engage with the 5 themes of geography, which include location, place, region, movement, and human environmental interactions. The use of the 7 continents will also be used for a focus for these students. And 6th grade students will be able to develop their map identification skills, compare and contrast of map types, as well as identification and deep intellectual analysis of the 5 themes of geography with cultures. So specifically, we're going to be looking at like physical geography between the US and Canada, the economic connections of Mexico and Cuba, as well as the economy of South America, Asia, and Africa will also be included. And then we'll also discuss the geography of Europe and China as well. So pretty like all-encompassing in this world geography course. And then these are some of our subpoints of our rationale. But overall, we believe that 6th grade students are beginning to develop deeper meaning skills, starting with geography. It'd be like a good introductory course. Since world history provides like a holistic understanding of the world, it can better prepare students to understand topics that will later be built upon throughout their social studies classes in middle school and eventually high school. This course will provide students with basic geography knowledge of where civilizations are, rivers, and other important factors to understand the connections within history. If they don't understand where things are in the world, it's going to be hard for them to conceptualize where things in geography are going to be. So kind of building on this concept of world geography is that we then are doing 7th grade ancient civilizations. So the course description for this is that 7th grade students will be introduced to the study of ancient civilizations and cultures from around the world. So we're still having that like holistic like worldview. Topics that will be covered during the course will include ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and Mesoamerica, as well as ancient and classical Greece and ancient Rome. And because like we're still in the introductory stage for a lot of these students, this will include introductory level of like analyzing the concepts of culture, politics, economics, social, and human environmental interactions and structures, similar to what they were building on in 6th grade. And this will expose them to gain like that above knowledge of just identification, and you'll start working on that comprehension and application process of like comparing and contrasting like the subtopics of each of these civilizations. So yet again, here's just a few bullet points of a rationale, but ultimately, since students are beginning this like building block of their connections with world geography, we thought it was just fitting for them to kind of continue on understanding how world geography is now building into ancient civilizations and history in general, and discussing the importance of this geography in these ancient civilizations and how geography played a role in the placement of these civilizations, as well as like the contributions to like these subtopics of history. Similar to geography, learning about ancient civilizations aids students in having a better understanding of the world. By students understanding the progression of the civilizations and the people who lived in them, students can have an insight into why and how history has unfolded and grown in the fashion that it has. So like we both mentioned, like it's just continuing that building block. And then we have 8th grade. So, and mind you, all of these courses in middle school, we are saying are going to be mandatory because there are building blocks. So in 8th grade, we're doing the 1600s to the 1865 US history. And our course description is that 8th grade students will be exposed to the settlement of the US to the end of the Civil War in this course. So the 4 major focuses of this course will be the analyzing and synthesis of the way the government and international relations, economics, and conflict have like shaped early history prior to the Reconstruction era. And then students will develop like a stronger, more encompassing skill set. So this is where we're starting to like develop those skill sets we want them to have in high school. Those like higher learning skill sets, such as exploring complex patterns, interactions, and relationships, differentiating between facts from opinion, which is going to be huge. Also evaluating sources for validity and credibility to be able to detect bias, propaganda, and censorship. So those are some of the basic skill sets we're wanting them to learn. And then our rationale, yet again, bullet points. But our rationale for it is like, since history is not stagnant nor society, it's important that students are continuing to build on their knowledge and skills they've been taught through middle school thus far. So teaching US history through like this limited time frame allows students to gauge in more of the specifics of US history, which allow them to gain more development and that higher thinking skills that we're wanting them to start progressing on. So furthermore, like teaching students US history now allows for students to understand human actions and the consequences resulting in these actions that later we come to identify in US history. And then since US history gains complexity as kind of the country ages, students will be able to identify and explore these patterns that become more discernible in later history classes when we start to get a little bit more in depth with some of the eras that can be a little bit more confusing for students because there's so many more details in them. So I'm gonna pass it over to Will to describe our high school courses.
And so continuing on to ninth grade, we kind of continue with this trend of 1865, but we go into kind of the more modern era. So for this course description, ninth grade students will continue to their developmental comprehension of US history, specifically from Reconstruction until the national catastrophe of 9/11. Students will connect to US rich history through the government of the people, by the people, for the people, which includes its citizens' struggle to achieve freedom and rights. This course will also include framing the lens of US failures, such as the treatment of Native American tribes, immigrants, women, and people of color. Skills students should be expected to learn from our development being an ability to use and apply abstract principles, articulate and construct reasoned arguments from diverse perspectives and frames of references, and analyzing cause and effects relationships. So the rationale, here's our bullet points of this, but in more depth. Ninth grade students, after having some form of US history in middle school, even if they have transferred from different districts, will have some prior knowledge of US history, which will allow for a progression of their knowledge over the US history. Students will continue to progress in their high thinking skills through and understanding the complexity that this period of US history represents. Even though Reconstruction, the Progressive Era, and the political and economic connections of the Great Depression and the World Wars. So we're really trying to continue on the idea of American history, and bringing it all the way through 9/11 is kind of going to shape the world as it is for them now. Then for 10th grade, we are going to have a course just on US government. So 10th grade students, for the course description, 10th grade students will be given a more in-depth look at the political system in place in the United States. This will focus on the US Constitution, landmark Supreme Court cases, and many other points of significance in the political structures of the United States. This will add to the knowledge that students have developed in their American history studies with a greater degree of focus on the system than those who are affected by it. Students will develop skills in reading, analyzing, and understanding the political and legal system that surrounds them. And so our rationale for this is summarized in those bullet points, but more specifically it's a course in American government is critical to developing a proper citizenry and general for enabling students to know their rights. Thomas Jefferson said that the public education system should exist to support a well-informed voting population, and that's exactly the purpose of a government class. Knowing your rights, and even more so, knowing what rights have been denied to people, is important to any student and their base understanding of the United States. This course will also help emphasize primary source reading, as well as refine their reading skills of all sources in general. And that kind of moves us into our final course, which is very different, is just a general world history course. So they had their ancient civilizations and world geography course in middle school, but having a general world history course is very important for a multitude of reasons. But the course description for this is that 11th grade world history students will focus on cultures around the world at various points in time. This course will add to the information they received from their world history or world geography and the course on ancient civilizations they previously had. This course will have an express focus on non-European based cultures and civilizations, while also having some wiggle room for students to pursue topics of their own intrigue. Students will develop a cross-cultural understanding beyond Western history and see the cultural significance of many other cultures than have received less focus historically. So the rationale of this one makes a lot of sense. It's based in what we talked about previously, but this course is to help ensure that students don't cling to Eurocentric beliefs as much as possible. Having a course that teaches students about the history of the world beyond the Western world is important to developing open-minded students who have good, well-rounded understanding of the world. This course will also make sure that students learn about historic interpretation and translation and various other sources. There will be an attempt to help students remove their own modern and American lens on the subjects covered.
So
And that's really all.
yeah, so ultimately all of these we are requiring for students. None of these are classes that are pretty much up for discussion on not being able to take. And the importance of that is when Will and I were discussing about which classes we should take, we were going under the basis that, these are all classes that students need to take to have not only just a basic understanding of the country we live in and their rights, but also like Will had mentioned, and also like one of the groups that focused on last week is moving away from this Eurocentric belief system. And that way we're exposing students to more cultures that aren't always having this Eurocentric belief system, which is really important because a lot of times students don't always get that. So we really wanted to emphasize that, yes, obviously through US history, they are going to get a lot of this Eurocentric connections with US history. But outside of that, we are wanting to challenge students that when they graduate high school, they are more well-rounded citizens and not ignorant of the world around them outside of the US. Anything you want to add?
That's about it. Once they finish all this, they get the graduation.